This is the new TC Pride Podcast, episode 44, part 2 of on-location coverage of a special screening of Project Q with Sarah McPeck. TC Pride Podcast, we are on location at Lush in Minneapolis for the Big Fat Comedy Hour and a very special screening of Project Q. And I'm here with one of the artists from the film. Could you please introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about your art form?
I am Heather Spear. I also perform under the name of the Gentleman King. I have, my whole life I've been a performer. At 6, I told my mother that was what I wanted to do with myself. So I am a dancer, I'm an actor, I'm a musician and a singer, and in the best possible way of being able to combine all of those things, I have a cabaret show, which means that I can do all of those things. Particularly in a queer mindset. I have a queer performance art show called Dykes to Drag that has been running consistently since 1999. In 1999, drag queens were known to pop culture. Drag kings weren't then, and they're not really still now. So in the Twin Cities, there were drag queen, there were the 90s and the Saloon, there were drag queen shows there. There was a drag king show at a place called Club Metro that doesn't exist anymore. And I was a modern dancer at the time, primarily a modern dancer, and a bunch of myself and some of my other modern dancer queer friends were like, well, why can't we have a space that combines both king and queens? Why can't we have a space that also places an emphasis on the actual performance quality as opposed to just the going up and getting kisses for the whole show? It's a much longer story there, but we wanted to create a cabaret space that played with the performance of gender and roughed with it in every single way possible. And in 1989, I wanted to reclaim the word dyke, the description dyke, the name dyke, and I also, queer wasn't what it is now. At the time, I thought dyke might become what queer is now. So, well, I chose wrong, but I chose right, too. So, Dykes to Drag is not, none of those words are what you think the definition is. It is not just drag, it is not just women on stage. It has always been a mix of all genders, all sexualities, and all performance types. So it really is a space that to explore the just f***ing with gender in every way, shape, possible.
You used a term in the film, gender blending, I believe, right?
Yeah, that's one of the words that we came up with early, because a lot of people call drag like gender bending. And I was much more into no, how about gender blending? Like my co-founder, the Glam King, Sarah Gordon, her first piece in our first show was playing George Michael. All right, so we've got this queer woman who is playing a gay man who on stage plays a straight man. But everybody knows, let's just mix it all up, and hopefully the audience will go away saying, I don't care what gender anybody was, I just enjoyed it.
So this film that you're involved with, so how did you end up getting involved with the film and meeting Sarah and the filmmakers?
I have known Shannon Blowtorch for years and years and years and years, and they were looking for another performer, and Shannon suggested me, and that was how I was introduced to Sarah and Tam and Laurel.
So you've been involved, sounds like, for a long time in the queer arts community and the arts community in the Twin Cities. For people, so it's a podcast, right? So it goes out worldwide, actually. So for people outside of the Twin Cities, what would you tell people about the community that they might be surprised by or they might not know?
What's amazing, what has always been amazing to me about the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, I think in specific, is anybody in the near to us Midwest. So we're talking North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and greater Minnesota. Anybody who is in their small hometown feeling queer, feeling strange, feeling, an artist doesn't fit into their small place, Minneapolis is a really easy place to move to, and the cost of living here is amazing. And so you have this amazing well of artistry that moves here. And so every single form of performance and or visual art or written art, there are people here that you're not going to find anywhere else. And yes, if they move to Minneapolis first and they want to go bigger, they move to Chicago or they move to New York or San Francisco, I'd say 7 times out of 10 they move back, because you can afford to do what you want to do in the Twin Cities and still there's a large enough community where you have the option to work with a lot of different styles, and it's small enough that it is actually accessible. You do not have to wait for 5 years in order to just get an audition with somebody. Like, you can go and contact them and be like, hey, I'd really like to work with you. And they're like, okay, cool, come on down. That is so not the expectation in so many other kind of arts hubs in the U.S. particularly. So I never thought that I would stay here at all. I moved here when I was 21, thought I was going to be here for a year, and I have not found another place that is as rewarding to be an artist in as the Twin Cities.
So you've been involved in the community for a long time. So you have a lot of perspective, like looking back. I've been asking people, looking forward, kind of where do you see the queer arts community going within the next few years?
I mean, I think in so many realms, the last 20 years. So we just had our 18th anniversary for Dykes Do Drag, so almost 20 years. In the last 20 years, the concept of being gay, lesbian, queer, bisexual, transgender it's in a completely different ballpark than it used to be. And there are institutions that in the early 90s and through all of the 90s, things like District 202, which was a youth group, a youth center for queer youth, that stopped existing because it didn't need to exist anymore, because every single high school has the equivalent of that. And it doesn't mean to me that I'm not sad about the loss of places like 202, but it also means that the acceptance of being queer has just filtered into all sorts of different levels of our existence. And to my mind, so when there was the gay marriage amendment was on the state ballot, I just heard all of these people against it saying, how am I going to be able to explain this to my children or my grandchildren? And my immediate response at the time was like, they already know. They know more than you do. They should be explaining it to you. They have queer friends. They have queer teachers. They have friends who are, whose parents are queer. Like, it's not that generation that we needs to explain to. It's the generations above us. So the next few years, what happens to queer art, we can take over, I don't know when, we take over. There we go. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, you did mention that, over the last few years, there have been some politically divisive moments, I guess, in America. And I guess since the beginning, since arts was a thing and since politics was a thing, the two have sort of been inextricably intertwined. So I guess I'd like to ask you, as an artist, how do you think the current events that have happened, recently, have affected the queer arts movement in general, and how do you think the current events that have taken place will continue to affect the movement going forward?
All I can say is from just a story from personal experience. We had our November Dykes Do Drag show a week or two after the election, and once the results came in on the election, I was like, I can't do a show. Are you fucking kidding me? I can't. I am so not in a place to be like, yeah, rah, let's have a show. And then once once we started doing the show, I realized I can't not do a show. This is exactly the time and the place that we need to be showing up for each other. And this is the only thing we can keep doing is make our voices louder and harder and more visible and more vocal. And we need to keep doing what we're doing, and through that, finding community and support to keep moving forward. That's all. Like, if we all go hide in our own little foxholes, you're going to come out and it's Armageddon. The only way that any of us is going to exist if we can keep building those communities and showing up for each other. So my hope for queer art in general is that we just keep showing up for each other and for the greater world.
And how can people follow you online and find out more about your work?
I am really crappy online presence. I am the Gentleman King. My show is called Dykes Do Drag. We always perform at Bryant Lake Bowl 5 times a year: February, April, June, September, and November. Always the full third weekend of the month. It's really reliable, so trust yourself. Either that or look up Bryant Lake Bowl online, and they have the calendar. But you can find us on Facebook. It's Dykes, DYKE.S, Do Drag. And we'll show you lots of pretty videos and photographs of what we do.
My name is Tiffany Roberts, and I go by Tiff Dynamite, generally speaking. Although I have other names, Oopsie Daisy, Go-Go Pim Tiff, different things, but it's been Tiff Dynamite for the last couple of years. I am a burlesque and cabaret performer, so I do circus and sideshow, and I do theater and burlesque.
Yeah, you show some of your sort of your aerial artwork in the film. It's pretty impressive. So how did you get involved with Project Q, with Sarah, with the film?
Sarah came to me, and I knew her peripherally through entertainment, and she came to me to ask me if I wanted to be involved in a film. And I'm not super into being filmed. I'm more of a live stage person, and I would much rather do something improvisationally or scripted on stage and have everybody enjoy it, and then just not see it again. I've seen myself on film before, and it always makes me nervous.
So you've been involved in the queer arts community for a long time in the Twin Cities. What would you tell people outside the Twin Cities about the community that they might be surprised by or that they might not know?
I guess they might be surprised by how diverse the art is in the queer community, and also about how big it is. For being a city, I mean, Minneapolis isn't a small city, but certainly in comparison to New York or Los Angeles or wherever, it's certainly a lot smaller. And I don't know that people would expect that in the middle of the Midwest, in the frozen tundra, that there's this whole like art scene, and there's a whole, and a big part of it is the queer scene, the art scene. I think they'd be surprised, whether it's physical media like painting or sculpting, or whether it's entertainment or whatever. I think they'd be really surprised about the size and scope of the art.
Yeah, and I think the film does a really good job of portraying that. I mean, they show a really broad sort of slice of the community and how diverse it is. Like I say, you've been involved in the community for a long time. Where would you maybe see it going in the next few years? I
guess what I see is more integration. I've noticed that there's been Queertopia, for instance. It drew, because it's during Pride, it draws a lot of queer people or queer identified people on the spectrum, but it also draws a lot of people who don't consider themselves to be queer at all, and they're allies. And I see a lot of this combining of things, both socially and artistically, of people combining themselves. People in doing a show. You do a show, like when we did Queertopia, I don't keep bringing it up, but it seems to be the best example. There are plenty of people in that show who don't necessarily identify as queer, but the work that they're doing is focused on that. And there's this sort of mainstreaming of queer art it sort of has blended its way into non-queer art, which is great. And it's sort of it's kind of a big, massive this ocean of art, rather than being this is queer art and this is not, having it be separated.
Yeah, the labels matter less, and the boundaries kind of matter less, and the genres sort of matter less, and it all is kind of becoming one thing almost, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it did come up in the film a couple of times where there are a lot of queer artists who don't necessarily want to be identified exclusively as a queer artist, fill in the blank, right? That they're an artist who just happens to be queer as part of their identity. How would you feel about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that as Blowtorch said, I think that if you're the best queer DJ in town, that's great. But she wants to be the best DJ. Period. She wants to be the best. Overall, I primarily in the last couple of years, my troupe, the Wicked Wenches Cabaret, we call them vaudevilles. It's sort of like it's vaudeville and musical kind of together.
Sounds delicious, but
it does, doesn't it? But we take an existing play or we write one, and then instead of singing, we strip or we do aerial work or whatever at our theater, Minsky Theater Northeast, and we draw. I would say like 50% of our audience are just straight couples who come and watch the show for fun, and 50% of the audience are all the queerdos who come to see our show, So I would like to, I know that for myself and for Jack Vitale, who's my show partner, I think that we would like to see we would like to be seen not just as burlesque or as a not just as like a burlesque theater, this is the best in burlesque theater. We'd like to be seen as like, this is a really good, legitimate theater thing that we're doing, So I understand what Shannon's talking about, where she's like, I don't want to be seen just as the best queer DJ. I want to be seen as the best DJ.
yeah, she also said something about like, I don't want to be known as just like a house DJ or hip hop DJ. I want to be just an amazing DJ, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So the last thing I want to ask you about too is that the political climate in the United States has gotten pretty divisive in a lot of ways. How do you think that the current events that have taken place over the last year have affected the queer arts movement in general, or how do you think current events that have happened might continue to affect the queer arts movement going forward?
Well, back in the day, pre-Obama, we had a whole lot to say about the Bushes and so forth. We had a whole lot to say about politics. And then when Obama got into office, we got very excited and very positive about the changes he was making. And I think that then the art probably shifted a little bit more. They do a lot of comedy, and I think the comedy probably shifted more away from let's make fun of the president and talk about his policies and things, to being kind of supportive of that and being critical, maybe more precisely critical of each other, and trying to continually improve. And I think what's going to happen with this current president, I think what's going to happen is we're going to end up seeing people go back to that original format of the parody in comedy and in art, talking more about fighting it in the best way they can, in using their art to sort of express themselves and to try to propel us forward despite any kind of backlash that we might have from the current administration.
So the pendulum is swung sort of the other way for a little while.
Yeah, it swung kind of back to where it was, and maybe even worse for the moment. But we'll persevere.
So how can people find you online and follow your work?
I mostly use my Facebook to advertise, so it's Tiff Dynamite Roberts, TIFDYNAMITE Roberts, and they can find me on Facebook, and also I have an Instagram account, same thing, Tiff Dynamite on Instagram, and Twitter people seem to follow me a lot on Twitter. I think I have it set up so they can it automatically feeds to Twitter, which is also Tiff Dynamite, and that's the best way to follow me. I have shows once a month at least that people can come and see. You can come see. We do a classic show. It's a Minsky Follies, so we sort of do a 20s speakeasy kind of feel to it, which is really fun. It's a lot of dancing and singing, and it's really cool. So, yeah, we do that, and then every other month the Wicked Wenches Cabaret has our scripted shows. Our next show we're doing is Midsummer Night's Wet Dream, which is going to be really fun. So, yeah, we're going to do it kind of Sam Raimi style. It's going to be ridiculous. So that's going to be in April. So you can come check it out on my Facebook page. Friend me on Facebook, and you can get my updates.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with your work and your art going forward.
Thank you.
The TC Pride Podcast has been a production of Podletter Media and Twin Cities Pride. Subscribe now on iTunes or Google Play and submit your first Pride story at myfirstpride.org.